What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall markets. I'm going to talk about why tomorrow is going to be a very important day as we have earnings coming out for tomorrow, which is going to cause some high volatility, not to mention new developments on what we're seeing on our economic calendar. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer is very soon in just about 11 days. Anyways, as far as NIO is going, we are range bound right now. We did see this thing push up very close to our target yesterday. I was talking about how 4.8 is likely going to be coming. And we saw NIO approach the 4.8 area during the pre-market, only to get a big rejection after that. And now it's just continuing to trade sideways. So the question remains, what's going to happen from this point on? I want to talk about that real quick. Let's first talk about NIO though, and then I'll talk more about what's happening with other factors. So NIO has earnings for tomorrow. It's going to cause a very, very big move in the share price. It's either going to be, launching us back up towards the fives. That's going to push the share price up almost 10%. Or we could be looking for a big rug pull all the way down to the low fours. It all depends on what they end up announcing. So looking at their sales thus far, you guys can see that we saw a 30% growth in October, and their sales were pretty strong for the third quarter. So we should be expecting a lot better numbers than before. In fact, we had one of our strongest quarters ever during the last report. So hopefully we get some good looking numbers. On top of this, we saw a nice amount of growth, especially because of Envda, which is not being included. And looking at the data like this, you guys can really see how the latest quarter was pretty strong. Look at the last couple of months. We're getting consistent 20,000 deliveries. So hopefully things look a lot better. Now, right now, Wall Street is expecting the company to post an EPS of about a loss of 31 cents per share, with the revenues expected to grow by about 1.5%. It's about $2.65 billion. Over the last 2 years, NIO has beaten EPS estimates 50% of the time and it's beaten revenue estimates about 25% of the time. But you have to consider the fact that there were a lot of very, very difficult periods during the pandemic that this is still accounting for. And as of recent, they've been doing really well when it comes to beating on revenue. On top of this, we'll be watching to see what they say about their sales and their growth for Envda. When it comes to their expansionary plans and what they tell us about as a preview for like NIO Day, we're going to be listening to all of that. But the big thing for NIO, the biggest factor is going to be what they tell us about their future sales and what we should be expecting for when it comes to profitability. If NIO starts talking about when we could be expecting a profit, whether it takes another quarter or 2 quarters, or if they say early next year, that could be very, very bullish. And then what we expect for the end of the year, I do expect us to get a nice estimate. Most likely the numbers are going to be pretty good, but this will depend on how well they do in terms of profitability. So their margins are what are like really tough right now, especially with the higher interest rates. So we'll be watching to see how things end up going with that. So listen to what they tell us about their margins, listen to what they tell us about their EPS and revenue, and let's see what they tell us about their future sales when it comes to growth and projections like that. Envda is expected to grow, and I do think they're going to be very optimistic about that. I'm not too sure about what they tell us when it comes to like the longer term future about profitability and their margins. I think that's what Wall Street are going to be looking at very, very carefully. Right now, volume is at about 81 million. It's above average as we're seeing a lot more buyers stepping in. We closed pretty flat, at least for NIO. We didn't really move much. We saw a little bit of a dip only to get bought back up. So as of right now, we just saw a flat day. Essentially, it's not really doing a whole lot for the time being. For other factors, we saw short volume once again decrease a bit as we're still holding up quite well. And then finally, when it comes to their earnings, we do tend to meet a lot of expectations. Financials show revenue per share has been on a bit of an uptrend, and our PE ratio as of recent has been lowering because of how weak the share price has been. So these weaknesses in the share price, I still believe that they're very good buying opportunities for the long term. Let's hope and see what NIO tells us. I believe they're going to be very optimistic, and there could be a big move coming, so get ready for that. As far as the overall market goes, just know that that could also have an effect. But just know that NIO, to me, is looking more bullish. At least technically speaking, we're trying to base here. If we get a good amount of earnings, we could try to break past 4.8. If that breaks, we're looking for 5 as our target to fill the gap. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 4.4 to start dipping. It does look like it has potential to push, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. The market was very flat. We saw financials a little bit in the red. Other tickers were in the red, but then we saw, the S&P 500 and then the Nasdaq got bought back up throughout the day because tech held us up alongside retail. And we saw some consumer durables like Tesla that pushed up as well. So we started off with a bit of a dip because of the tensions between Russia and Ukraine. That was a little bit weaker news for the market, not the best of news. But then things improved as time went on. In terms of our economic calendar, just know that there's not really any significant data coming out for tomorrow. Just a couple of bill and bond auctions at 11:30 a.m. And then that's because the main time to be watching for volatility will be at these times. NIO has earnings, by the way, and I think I forgot to mention this earlier. Tomorrow before market open, we have earnings. So make sure you watch that very, very carefully. Before the stock market opens in the US, we should be hearing from their announcements. Then we have Target, TJ Maxx, Wix, and a few more announcing their earnings. After market close, we have Nvda, which is going to be a big one. The market recovered because Nvda started running and started squeezing as we're seeing buyers stepping in. So we'll see what happens going into tomorrow. As far as NIO goes, we're looking for a big reaction, either a big gap up or gap down, depending on how earnings end up going. And then Nvidia is going to cause a big move as well. So wait and see for those earnings. But with that being said, what do I see for the share price? Like I said before, guys, it all depends on earnings. It does look like it favors upside a bit more as we're trying to base here. We have kind of like an inverse head and shoulders. So we could be looking for an attempt to get back up to 5 as the most likely possibility. But that depends on how well earnings go. If earnings are poor, it is also possible we start dipping and losing these lows. So it all depends on that. I still see potential in the chart, but we'll give it some time to develop. As far as SPY goes, we look very bullish on the 4-hour, especially approaching Nvidia's earnings. This chart had a bullish divergence. It is favoring that it wants to go back up towards these higher levels, especially because when you look at, for instance, the daily time frame, SPY has this big gap to fill all the way up to about the 593 area. So most likely by tomorrow, if not by after Nvidia's earnings, we should attempt to fill that gap. So I favor upside more on SPY for a little bit of a push. As far as ES goes, we also favor upside for this imbalance float towards 59.68. That's also looking like a stronger possibility, at least for the time being. For other factors out there, we have Tsla, which is looking more promising. There is a possible inverse head and shoulders forming on the 4-hour time frame. The daily looks more strong, and then also the 4-hour has this inverse head and shoulders. This could lead to more upside. As long as we don't lose 332, I think we're favoring a push up towards the 360 area. Maybe Nvidia could have an effect on that. Nvidia looks bullish on the 4-hour, so we'll see if we push towards 150 tomorrow. But then whether or not we break that depends on earnings. So earnings are going to be key for Nvidia. We'll see what happens. Bitcoin's once again going to be testing 91,000 as our support. We'll see if this bounces off this 20 EMA or not. That's going to be the main support. Could get a bounce on Bitcoin from 91,180 to make our way back up towards these higher levels. So look for a small dip before it attempts to rebound. The NQ chart looks like it's going to be testing 20,800. If that breaks, we could get closer to 21,000. QQQ has a double bottom bullish divergence. If we continue to push, we're looking for this 507 area to be where we get this gap fill. So I could be looking for more upside right over here. In terms of Aapl, we're holding our support very nicely, especially where this key support happens to be. We could be dipping closer to about this 226 area before it tries to bounce and continue to push for 230. But overall, it looks more bullish. For Netflix, we look very bullish. We're approaching, the new Christmas events that they announced with Beyonce performing on Christmas. We could be approaching 875 very soon. IWM looks more bullish. We're looking for 231 as our resistance. We'll see if we break that to push for 233. But nonetheless, we look more bullish. Coin has a nice accumulation structure, so we could be pushing again for the 325, then 330 area. Amazon looks more bullish. If we break past 205, we're looking for a pump back up for the 208 area. Meta, as long as we're above 560, I'm favoring 564 to be tested very soon. Microsoft could be pushing for, I'm going to be looking for an attempt to get up to about 418 tomorrow. If that breaks, we're looking for 420. And Google remains more bullish. We're looking for this imbalance fill for 180. So overall, the market looks very bullish. I also want to call out that the VIX got this big rejection here. It's very flat right now, but we have kind of like a double top that's forming. We'll see if the VIX gets a rejection after Nvidia's earnings to fill this gap below in the 14s, or if it gets a breakout to fill this upper gap. It depends on what happens with Nvidia's earnings. So we'll wait on that. Tomorrow, the market may gap down before it continues to push, and there is a lot of upside potential approaching Nvidia's earnings. We'll see what Nvidia leads to. As far as NIO goes, we are looking a little bit more bullish with a nice inverse head and shoulders, and this imbalance could fill, taking us up towards $5. But this depends on what happens with earnings. So get ready for earnings before market open in the US for tomorrow. I thank you all so much for listening. Please have a great day, and I'll see you guys very soon. Get ready for NIO's earnings. Thank you so much for listening, and peace out.